15 wild but totally realistic predictions for the USA by 2030. 2030 isn't that far away. I mean, it's only what, four years and 9 months away. So, this if it comes true, these predictions could really change the country and, the rest of the world, as a byproduct of it. And I love these types of videos, these types of prediction type videos. And I think the Geography King is really well placed in making this video because he's really well traveled. He's got his finger really on the pulse. So yeah, let's see what he reckons might happen.
Howdy, it's Kyle going over some pretty wild scenarios of what North America may look like by 2030. The types of things I'll be discussing in this video would have been unthinkable, incomprehensible a few months ago, but with the state of world geopolitics where they are right now, the things I'll be discussing I believe are actually quite plausible. You take a look at a world map in 1935 and by 1945 it looked quite a bit different. So we could be witnessing the same type of geopolitical upheaval right now with borders changing, alliances changing, stuff like that. So again, the things I'll be discussing would have been laughable a few months ago. Maybe like, let's have some fun, let's talk about some crazy things. But right now, I think some of these are actually quite plausible. So I also want to point out that I'm neither predicting nor advocating for any of these things. I think just with the way things are going, none of these things are really all that terribly far-fetched. So just take a look at some what I think are plausible scenarios for what North America might look like by 2030. First, what if the 6 New England states unified and attempted to join Canada? This would be Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. And I can see these 6 states wanting to be unified as one cohesive unit and perhaps move in a different direction if they feel the U.S. is moving in a direction that they don't agree with. So whether being an independent country or perhaps joining Canada, that might be a good move for them. And the 6 states combined have a population of about 15 million people, and Boston is the only big city amongst all those. From a Canadian perspective, these are some of our nicest states, some of our lowest crime states, best schools, best hospitals. These are states that generate enough tax revenue to pay their bills so they wouldn't be a burden on the country. They wouldn't have to be subsidized by some of the other provinces.
The resistance from the US federal government would be massive, though. It would be huge. I mean, what are the legal, abilities that the states have in order to leave the union? Do they have the authority to do that, or would it need to be sanctioned by the federal government? Because if it needs to be sanctioned by the government, there's just no chance. I just don't think they would ever allow that to happen unless they were getting something really big in return.
So I think this could be an interesting match, New England and Canada. So I can understand why Canada might not want New York. That would just dominate your own country's politics. But with these 6 states, I think these could fit well with Canada. They share your pain with winter. And I think these states, I'm not going to speak for them, but they'd probably be okay with higher taxes, but not having to worry about health insurance and medical debt kind of thing. So they might be more in line with Canadian politics based on, maybe potential directions the U.S. goes if they feel that that's not the direction that the New England states want to go. So again, I'm not predicting this, but I do think this could be a pretty interesting match. New England states either part of Canada or at least maybe independent, allied with Canada, NATO, and the EU type things, as opposed to, say, Russia or countries that are right now I feel are our enemies. So again, not predicting this, but I think it would be a pretty good option for New England and Canada.
I'm trying to think, financially, how would this benefit, Maine and those other states? I mean, it depends on the political climate. If it's more, if it continues to be quite volatile in the states, maybe the stability of Canada might be attractive. I think Mark Carney is the leader of Canada now. He used to be the governor of the Bank of England, super smart guy. Maybe they might prefer that. I'm trying to think, what else would they benefit though? Would the benefits really be enough for the massive legal battle that they would face if they wanted to leave the union?
All right, now what if Puerto Rico leaves the U.S. and joins Canada? And for years, Puerto Ricans have been faced with 3 options: the status quo, remaining a territory of the U.S., seeking statehood, or seeking independence. But all these years, I've always felt there's a 4th option, and a pretty good one too, and that's to join Canada. And I think this would be a win-win-win for Puerto Rico, Canada, and the U.S. So right now, Puerto Rico is losing population, and after Hurricane Maria in 2017, they found out that they were kind of second-class citizens in the U.S. more than ever. I'm sure they already felt that, but after that hurricane, just the lack of any type of compassion or funding. Just it was pretty bad down there. So I can see why they might think to move in a different direction. And
Yeah, I mean, that would leave a bitter taste in my mouth for sure. If, you know, if you've got this really close relationship, or so you thought, with the US, and then there's no help to be found, that would leave you upset, wouldn't it?
why Canada might be a great fit is because right now Canadians spend billions of dollars retiring in Florida and Arizona, especially Florida. So if Canadians feel that Florida is becoming enemy territory, maybe they don't want to be spending billions of dollars retiring in Florida. Perhaps Puerto Rico as a province would be more attractive. And from Puerto Rico's perspective, Canada would probably actually invest in the country, improve infrastructure, schools, hospitals type things, because you would actually have Canadians wanting to move there because they don't have a Florida, but then they would have a Florida. So, and if you're Puerto Rico, you're somewhere tropical, beautiful land, you're always going to have to, tourism and retirees is always going to be a part of your economy. But if you're in a country that also has Florida, you're competing with Florida. But if you're part of Canada, you're not competing with Florida for all that. So I've always felt that Puerto Rico as a province on a territory of Canada would be a pretty good fit. And again, with the way things are going right now, Puerto Ricans might see that as a potential option, and Canadians might see that as a potential way to, increase Canadian territory, somewhere tropical, somewhere that could provide things, crops can grow and things you can't grow in Canada. Maybe you can't rely on Florida or what else. So again, not predicting this, but I can see how Puerto Rico, part of Canada, would be an attractive option.
Again, though, because Puerto Rico, as far as I understand it, is a U.S. territory. Or does Puerto Rico still retain its own sovereignty? Can it still make decisions on, where it wants to, whether it wants to remain a territory of the U.S.? Can it pick, what it wants to do? Or does it still need sanctioning by the U.S.? Because, again, the U.S. would never, the government would never, give, Puerto Rico away, for nothing. Unless, I suppose, the citizens of Puerto Rico really made it, really clear, I suppose. Tricky.
Okay, so another one. What if Hawaii left the U.S. and joined Japan? And this might seem pretty far-fetched, but this could also be a win-win for both places. I think many Hawaiians also view themselves as second-class citizens in the U.S., even though they are a state with senators and they can vote for president kind of stuff, but they often are forgotten. And from a Japanese perspective, they're losing population. They're kind of in a downward spiral in terms of population. It can get pretty dire there in Japan. Hawaii would be a big land grab. It's a lot of land compared to what Japan has. It's very crowded. They could perhaps do some economic development on Hawaii, which it could certainly use. A lot of Japanese already vacation and retire in Hawaii, and a big part of the Hawaiian population is of Japanese descent. So
interesting.
Pearl Harbor being a Japanese military base would be kind of weird, but I think, again, with the way things are going, anything's possible. And again, I think this could be a win-win for Hawaii and Japan, because Japan would pick up Pacific territory, strategic kind of stuff, and in an ever-changing world, the Pacific theater of operations, they're now the good guys kind of thing. So, again, far-fetched. I don't think that's going to be something that will happen, but it's something that in today's world, that might be something that Hawaii and Japan could be interested in exploring.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely cause big tensions between the US and Japan, though. I mean, the Japanese would get a lot out of it for sure. Really great place to base, some military assets, because you have access to that region of the world. But, the US would definitely, Hawaii is such a, aside from the strategic point of view, just the beauty of the place, it would be a gem to to lose that.
Okay, and here's another one. What if California, Oregon, and Washington combine to create a NAFTA pipeline type thing so that goods can be transported from Canada down to Mexico through these three states, avoiding any kind of tariffs kind of thing? So you can get tropical things and things coming from factories in Mexico going up the Interstate 5 corridor through the Pacific Coast states up into Canada, and that would be kind of effectively bringing back NAFTA, so things would be cheaper amongst North American trading. So that's a big deal. We often think about China trade and Russia oil and other foreign countries like that, but most of our trade is Canada and Mexico. So bringing a NAFTA type situation back could be really good for those three Pacific Coast states, as well as Canada and Mexico, to avoid some of these tariffs. And I know from a Canadian perspective, that's the part of the country that has the fewest people. So that'd be kind of, it wouldn't work out the best geographically and transportation wise. But based on the way things are going, it could be better in that regard. So California, Oregon, Washington, for years, these three states have hated each other. But again, with the way things are changing, I can see these three states, kind of like the 6 New England states, we've hated each other forever, but maybe this is the time we need to set aside our stupid differences. We have minute differences because in the grand scheme of things, we really do agree on most stuff. So again, not necessarily something I expect to happen, but these three states, being that it would just take 3 states to create a NAFTA corridor between Canada and Mexico, I think is plausible, because you're not going to get it from North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, but you could get it from those 3 states on the West Coast.
I think this one is probably a bit more realistic because I can't see like the political backlash. I mean, there would be some, but it wouldn't be as big as like giving away Hawaii to Japan. Or what do you guys think?
Okay, so what about this one? California just says, screw it, we're going off on our own. At the time of me recording this, the day before, the California governor basically told the rest of the world, hey, we're not Washington, make trade deals with us. We can do things independently without having all these tariffs and some of this trade upheaval. And
wow, really? So states can do that? So the states can decide that, if we can trade on our own without any of the tariffs that have been introduced? I didn't know that they could do that. I thought that the tariffs were nationwide and that was it.
This is kind of dangerous talk a little bit, but some of the bigger states, California and Texas as well, do have independent trade contracts with countries, China or whatever, Brazil. So that's not out of the ordinary. But when you start talking about we're not Washington.
Yeah, that is kind of like saying, we're not part of the US in a way. Yeah, I kind of agree with what Carl's saying here. I mean, because surely the country should be united, for better or for worse. Like, it should be a united front. Or what do you guys think? Do you think it's right that California are basically saying, we're not going to listen to any of this talk about tariffs. We're going to still operate under the previous, or we can make our own rules type thing?
Deal with us. That's honestly getting a little bit dangerous. So I'm not saying that California is planning on leaving, but state leaders would be foolish to not have a secession plan. I mean, of course, state leaders in California would be foolish to not have a secession plan for decades, but certainly now they need to have some kind of contingency for secession, I think. I mean, you'd be foolish not to. Would they? Could they? Would it work? I mean, any state going on their own opens up the cold butterfly effect. Who knows what will happen, the trickle down of all that. So
yeah, if one does it, then I think there'd be others for sure. Or do you think, like, let's say if California were to leave, do you think that would be the last of it?
Easy to say, Californians, we have the 5th biggest economy in the world, but things would it would be major upheaval you couldn't really predict. But of all the states, it's the one that would have the best chance of succeeding on its own. So what do you think about it? Being from California, I personally think that the people there would rather be part of the United States of America, along with other states that agree with them and have NAFTA, free trade, more alliances with the EU and NATO. But, if it looks like, kind of like New England, that they feel the country is moving towards, Russia, anti-NATO, anti-UN, then maybe it might be time to secede. But I don't think that's their top priority. I feel pretty confident with California wanting to be part of the country, but if it came to it, they have to play their hand. Maybe they will.
It would be so messy because of all of the bases, all of the military bases. Because what would happen to the military bases? Because yes, some of them are based in California, but it's the United States military. So you'd have to move all of those bases out. But then what about the soldiers who are born and raised in California? Do they become part of a separate Californian military? It would be such a complicated separation.
All right, and if California secedes, I guarantee you Texas will, because it would trigger Texans to no end if California were independent and Texas weren't. So, and even if
the Lone Star State, right? Yeah.
California didn't, Texas, you'd be foolish too to not have a secession contingency. And I'm pretty sure Texas probably does have a contingency. But I also feel, kind of like California, Texans don't want to be on their own. They'd rather be part of the U.S., but maybe they feel that the U.S. might be going in a different direction from them because, the rest of the U.S. might be like, hey, that'd be great. Get rid of California and Texas, and man, things get so much better for us. But the thing is,
But would things get better for the rest of the country if California and Texas left? Because, you know, those two are probably major like contributors of natural resources. I think a lot of like oil and gas comes from Texas that gets exported around the country. So would it be better for the rest of the country?
you lose California and Texas, your political differences still change. It's just now it's Florida and New York as your two top states arguing. So the differences of the way things are, the divide doesn't change with the two biggest states leaving, but it would hurt the overall economy of whatever's left. And if Texas and California both leave, it could really set off a domino effect for things. So again, I don't think Texas wants to. I don't think California wants to. But, you know, if it gets to the point where they have to play their hand, they are holding a halfway decent hand. So will they play it? I don't know. Things can change. But, you know, again, if California and Texas were both to secede, it could really open up a gnarly can of worms for the rest of the country. Okay, but what about this one? The Treaty of Appomattox gets repealed and the Confederacy becomes a country without a war, just saying, hey, you know, you guys can go off and have your own thing. You've wanted it all these years, all these decades, you know, have it. Here it is.
That would be crazy.
And, you know, I've lived in the South for basically my entire adult life, and I can tell you with pretty good certainty they would love to raise the rebel flag again. The leaders would, not the younger folks wouldn't, but the people that are in charge, the older governors and people that have all the say would love to raise the rebel flag again.
Really? Why though? Like, I'm genuinely asking, like, what is it about, you know, the Confederacy? Do they like so much? I'm genuinely asking this from a place of curiosity.
But all the states agree to that. If that were to happen, I think states would probably have to opt back in to the U.S. Maybe Virginia might. I can see maybe North Carolina might. I don't know. But, you know, could you see the breakup along those old divisions, those that I really don't think have gone away? I think there's always been that big divide in the U.S. And, you know, is this the trigger to finally just be what ends it? You know, is this the time Confederacy's like, all right, we're done. We're going to do our own thing. We wanted to do our own thing for decades, and you know, we can't do our own thing because the rest of the country's holding us back. The rest of the country's like, we like to do our own thing, but the South is holding us back. So is this something that needs to happen anyway? Is what's going on right now just an inevitable, you know, was this going to happen inevitably? Who knows? But this is something else that is possible. You know, again, if that were to happen, I'd certainly hope it happens without, you know, bloodshed, of course, but I can see something going along the lines of Czechoslovakia, where we just sign paper and say, hey, we're done. You know, maybe we'll be friends with each other. Czechia and Slovakia are friends, but I don't know. I think in that particular scenario, what's left of the U.S. would still be part of NATO, part of the UN, still allied with Canada and the EU and wealthy democracies. That's how we are now. We're friends with rich countries. That's what we like to do here. But the U.S., what's left of the U.S. would still be allied with that, but then the Confederacy would probably be more isolationist.
Yeah.
Texas would probably leave the Confederacy. They'd be on their own. So, I mean, again, these are wild scenarios, but I mean, I think it's all pretty plausible based on some of the things that have been going around. So,
just hypothetically, like, let's say, you know, it did happen. And as he describes, the Confederacy is like fairly isolated, doesn't have, you know, any sort of trade deals with the EU and the rest of the, you know, sort of G7 and stuff like that. Wouldn't they really suffer financially? Or are there enough resources, you know, within that the hypothetical Confederate region that they would still be wealthy by themselves? But if they don't have trade partners, I suppose they could develop their own trade relationships with countries maybe outside of the EU. There's plenty of countries outside of the EU that, you know, have money to spend. Brazil, India, China.
would the South want that? I think California and Texas don't really want to be independent. I think a lot of Southerners actually would rather be the South rise again, raise the rebel flag again. That horrifies, I know, many Southerners, but if you live in the South, you know that many of the leaders would love to do that. So is that something that's going to happen again?
Why, man? I don't know why.
So those are just a handful of wild scenarios that I wanted to discuss based on the current state of geopolitics on the planet. And again, I don't predict or advocate for any of these, but I do think something major is going to happen. I do predict major shakeup in terms of geopolitical alliances and borders. So I don't know what's going to happen specifically, but I do think something's going to happen. And it'd be nice to be able to just pull our hand up from the stove and be like, oh, yeah, we burned it. That's pretty stupid. But if I'm being honest, I think the bridge has already been burned. I think the ship has already sailed and sunk. I don't think our alliances will ever go back to what they were. So we may have to rethink what we're going to do as a country and alliances. And if it means breaking apart so we can be, because some people want to be friends with them and who wants to be friends with them kind of thing. And that might be what we have to do. I certainly don't want that to be what happens, but again, I think the bridge has already been burned. So I hate to be so pessimistic, but I think with what's going on in geographic upheaval right now, I think geographers need to be talking about this kind of stuff, even though it's pretty uncomfortable. But I mean, we're seeing potential changes in the world that we've never seen in this century, certainly, and again, not since the 1930s. So uncomfortable stuff, pretty pessimistic stuff. I don't know how it's going to end, but I do expect major geopolitical upheaval in the near future. But I mean, that's really all I have to say for this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get, obviously not being an American, I'm neither Republican or Democrat. Just like from this side of the pond, it does seem, like, unfortunately, the things that are happening now with these tariffs have probably caused a lot of goodwill to be erased. It's going to cause, it's hard for me to discuss this because, I'm not going to pick a side, but, I do see, unfortunately, I think Kyle is right. There's going to be a lot of change, geopolitically. Like a lot of relationships are unfortunately going to sour, have maybe already been soured. Things could turn around. I mean, who knows? Like things could really improve, and this could all be part of some greater strategy. I'm sure that there's intelligent people, in government. Maybe there is a big plan, but on the current, how things are right now, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.